Hey there, welcome to our AP Legal Zone podcast brought to you by AP Lawyers. We are your top fix for all weekly law updates, including family, immigration, wills, and estates law. Just a friendly reminder, we are not your lawyers, and everything contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and not to be construed as legal advice. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay connected with any updates and get notified about our new episodes.
Hello, I'm Angela Princewill, and today I want to talk to you about what you need to know before you get married. So, new year, new beginnings, there's Valentine's Day is coming up, love is in the air, and you may be thinking about tying the knot with your significant other. And first off, I want to say congratulations. I love love. I spend most of my working hours dealing with issues that involve people who have lost the love they once had. So when I get the chance to work with people who are just about to take the plunge, my thrill knows no bounds. So you're about to get married, and here's what I think you need to know from my perspective as an experienced family law lawyer. First off, the legal and social perception of marriage is completely different. So socially, a marriage is a celebration of love. We gather our closest and dearest, even though they might be about 1,000 people sometimes, to come witness the celebration of love, right? Kindred spirits, soulmates, finally joining together as one. Who doesn't love that? Remember, though, that legally, marriage is just a contract that comes with rights and responsibilities. So remember that. So while you're planning the wedding and all of that stuff, remember that you're planning a celebration that's fantastic and is 99% about your emotions and your feelings. But remember that once you sign that marriage, once you sign the dotted lines and now you're married, you have entered into a contractual relationships that comes with rights and obligations. And that's the part I'm going to talk about. And I know this might not be as fun as, planning catering and getting, your flowers and things like that, but I think this is pretty important. So the first or the first thing, I'm just going to touch on a few things. Obviously, there's a lot, but I'll just touch on a few that I think you should keep in mind. One is property that is brought into the marriage may not always be excluded if things go wrong, and you have to be calculating equalization of your net family properties. It is always shocking to people to find out that they have to equally share properties they brought into the marriage. I mean, the thought is, well, excluded, right? Like I made all of this before I got married. Why do I even have to share any of it? Well, the good news is with most people or with most properties, you don't you only share the portion that accrues during marriage. So say you have RSPs, investment homes, stocks, bonds, that sort of thing. And let's say your total portfolio on the date of marriage is worth about $1 million. If on the date of separation, God forbid, you find yourself in that situation, these assets are now worth $1.5 million. You don't have to share the entire 1.5. You would share the 500,000 that has accrued. For some people, that's great news. They're okay with the other person just, getting just that part that has accrued versus everything they had. But it's still surprising. Many people expect that the entire, if they acquired everything before they got into marriage, there's no justification for them having to share that. And I understand that. But again, that's the point of this video so that you're intentional. So now let's say, first off, notice I did say investment real estate when I mentioned real estate, right? So do not for a minute think that what I said about your assets applies to the matrimonial home by any stretch. The matrimonial home, it's its own separate beast. It is special and there's different rules that apply to that. So if you bring a matrimonial home into the marriage and let me put it simpler. So you have your home and you're living there and now you've met your special one. Of course, it makes sense to continue to live in that home, right? Of course it does. But without a marriage contract, if things are to go south, you will share half that property with the other person. There will be no exclusions given you for the date of marriage. So average property in the GTA these days is at least $1 million. So you come in with $1 million property. God forbid you're separating in the future, property is now worth $2 million, for example. You don't get the benefit of saying, well, I'm going to deduct $1 million because, that's what the home was worth when I brought it into the relationship. No, you're going to share that property equally. So it's going to be 50-50, except, of course, you have a marriage contract to the contrary. So be very careful. And even on this date of marriage, on a caveat, I should say, to this good news that I was sharing, with the date of marriage deductions that you get, the challenge is a lot of people don't even have access to what their assets were worth on the date of marriage. Like, it's extremely challenging to find statements for what your stocks were worth in 1993, right? So, what a marriage contract does for a lot of people is it documents the value of what they're bringing into the marriage. So it takes away disagreement. What if you had Pokemon cards that were worth, you know, $200,000 on the date of marriage, and as of the date of separation, it becomes $0, right? Which is what a lot of them should be worth. But obviously, I'm not a fan, so do not listen to me. But yeah, that's just an example, right? So if it was worth $200,000, for example, on the date of marriage, and there's a marriage contract where that's written, obviously, then you can get that deduction because you're entitled to the date of marriage deductions. But let's say it's even worth a lot more as of the date of separation, and you're trying to prove that you owned a portion of that as of the date of marriage, and so you should get an exclusion. Well, how do you really prove that? I mean, I guess in the case of something like a Pokemon card, are there maybe Pokemon card appraisers? Maybe. Or what if your partner is disputing that you even own that Pokemon card as of the date of marriage? So you see how things can get complex, right? So anyway, that's one thing to think about, that you are, by getting married to this very special person, you are pledging to share everything you own, including your properties, with them. Remember your spousal support obligation. I mean, under the law, you do have an obligation to support your significant other, and the extent of your support in terms of the amount you have to pay, the duration you have to pay for. All those depend on a variety of factors, right? Things like the length of your marriage, the roles each of you played during the marriage. All of those are factors when you're looking at sort of the extent of your support obligation, but the obligation exists. And people are often so shocked that they have to support a partner who chose to stop working, for example. So, if you're in a relationship and you don't necessarily agree, and notice in this case, I'm not saying marriage. So this applies to people that are just living common law. And, one person decides that they just would rather not work. I mean, hey, brunches, yoga, things like that. That sounds like fun, but on a more serious note, it could be for a variety of reasons, right? It could be medical, it could be childcare responsibilities, or it could just be the fact that the family doesn't necessarily need the extra money that's coming in, and you're fine on one income. And those are all very valid reasons. And it's usually fine during the relationship, or maybe in some cases it's not. But the point is, when there's a breakdown of that relationship, do not expect the courts to make an exception for you because, well, you never agreed, or they never talked to me about quitting their job. They left I hear things like they left a high paying job and took a lesser paying one, and I never agreed to it. So why do I have to support them? Well, if you've generally been supporting your partner for any length of time, you accept, of course, you have a marriage contract that protects you and releases you from any spousal support obligation. You should expect that if there's a breakdown in the relationship, that you will have to support that party, for some time, at the very least on a purely needs basis, right? Even if there's no compensatory basis. And I don't want to get too legal because this is supposed to be just on a high level to get you thinking and get you on the right track of the things you need to know before you get married, so that you're aware of the consequences of the relationship that you're getting into. So, children from previous relationships, that's something that you need to think about. It's fantastic. We all like to think about ourselves as good people, right? You meet someone, you love them, you also love, you love their child. And in some cases you're, the parental figure in this child's life, and you know taught them everything they know, and you've been fantastic. You're a great person. I believe you know it. But you want to think, is that really what you want? And I pause as I say that, because are you unknowingly putting yourself in the place of a parent? Now, if that is what you want, fantastic. And you need to understand that there's financial obligations that come with it. And so long as you're aware of that and you accept that, then that's great, right? I mean, it's nice to bring up the child and watch them thrive and all of that. It's thrilling. But just for a lot of people, they don't realize the financial obligation that comes with standing in the place of a parent to a child. So that's something that you want to think about if you're going into a relationship where you could potentially be seen as standing in the place of a parent to a child. And you have to understand that this could be from your subjective perspective. You might think, well, I'm not really standing in the place of a parent to this child, but it depends on the circumstances, right? And you could very easily find yourself in that scenario. So, what kind of financial obligation am I talking about? Have I said, a few $100s here or there for that little buddy that you love so much? No, not really. If you are found to be standing in the place of a parent, you could be looking at, a fixed monthly child support amount and contributions to extra expenses. So let's put some dollars to this so it makes more sense. Let's say you're earning $200,000 a year, and your significant other, your ex, if ever become an ex, earns $40,000. They have a child from a previous relationship that plays hockey that costs $5,000 a year, soccer 2,000, and maybe they need tutoring, expensive tutoring that costs you another $5,000 a year. Well, you could be looking at, in that scenario, you could be looking at paying $1,299 monthly. So let's call it $1,300 monthly in basic child support. And this is based on the guidelines. It's based on how much your income is. And about 79% of the other expenses, which with the numbers I just threw out there, you could be looking at another $790 a month. So $1,299, $790 is the financial obligation you could be looking at. And this would exist regardless of your relationship with the child. That's regardless of whether or not there is a continuing relationship with this child after the relationship ends. So that's something that you want to remember. Um, Another thought is inheritances, right? So this is an interesting one because a lot of people feel like they have a right to share their partner's inheritance. I mean, after all, even on a subconscious level, the person who left this gift or gave the inheritance must have been giving it to the family, right? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. Unfortunately, gifts and inheritances received during the marriage are excluded when calculating net family property, so you may not get to share in the inheritance. But if you are the owner of the inheritance, the person who received an inheritance, well, it's not so simple. So do not just think you're completely fine. If you receive your inheritance, for example, and you deposited it into a joint account, you go on vacation, and now that money is gone. It's gone. Well, that's what it is. It's gone. You don't get an exclusion for it. Well, what if you put that money into renovating the matrimonial home? You might as well kiss that money goodbye. But I know what you're thinking. Well, what if I got $100,000 in inheritance and there's still 50,000 of it left in our joint bank account? I could get to exclude that $50,000, right? Maybe, maybe not. It will depend on the facts of your case, because it is possible that depending on the circumstances, especially by putting that money into your joint account, that those monies may have lost their exclusionary character. So that would depend on the facts of your case. As you can imagine, these are just a few examples of some of the rights and responsibilities that flow from entering into a marriage. So, how do you deal with this and avoid any unintended consequences? Get a marriage contract or a cohabitation agreement. And I appear to have been talking about marriage. This, yes, while that's the case, a lot of people are opting to not get married. It does not mean that you don't have these obligations. So a lot of it would apply with some modification. So if you're looking at moving in with your significant other as the next step in your relationship, consider cohabitation agreement. So marriage contract, cohabitation agreement, that's the way you get to protect yourself, or at the very least, talk to a family law lawyer. Come talk to us. We have amazing family law lawyers on our team, and we'll be able to guide you regarding your rights and responsibilities. You can even agree in your contract that you want to share all of your assets equally, right? That's an option that's available to you. It's not always about excluding. It could even be about saying, well, this is what the law is right now. We don't know what the future brings, but we want to make sure that we share all our properties equally if anything were ever to happen. The point of it all is that you avoid, you avoid unintended consequences. We want you to be intentional about what you get out of this marriage from a legal standpoint. So I hope I've given you some things to think about in between doing the other more exciting chores. And as always, I will be back next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for listening and joining us in the AP Legal Zone. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more episodes by searching AP Legal Zone on anywhere you watch podcasts. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast today so you can stay connected with any updates and get notified about any new episodes.